There was no blinding flash to warn the galaxy what was coming, just a faint thunk from an orbital platform hanging in the void above Earth. And then, half a second later, a warship 200 kilometers away simply wasn't there anymore. What was once a towering dreadnought was now two drifting halves, severed so cleanly it looked like someone had erased a section of reality itself. Across the galaxy, military observers froze. The chatter in alien control rooms stopped mid-sentence. Even the most war-hardened species stared at their displays, searching for words that wouldn't come. It was humanity's first railgun test, and the message was clear. We had built something that didn't just kill, it rewrote the rules of war. The Galactic Council had called us inventive but harmless for decades, dismissing our weapons as crude and our fleets as slow. But now they watched a tungsten slug, no explosives, no fancy technology, punch through multiple hulks in a single shot, still accelerating as it disappeared into the black. The Council's military codes had no section for instant erasure, and the warlords of a dozen systems suddenly had a new name burned into their threat lists: Earth. It didn't look like much. In fact, from a distance, the orbital platform in high Earth orbit resembled an abandoned space elevator segment, a skeletal structure of girders and support beams stretching into the void. It had no glowing reactors, no visible weapons pods, no gunmetal shine that marked the dreadnoughts of other species. But inside, the magnetic rails, 5 kilometers long, were charged with energy equivalent to a small fusion reactor's entire daily output. At its heart was nothing more than a projectile, a tungsten carbide slug, 3 meters long, shaped like a dart and weighing just over 3 metric tons. No warhead, no guidance system, just raw, unforgiving mass. In human engineering circles, the weapon was called XR-72 Thunderstrike. But among the few alien spies who had managed to hear whispers about it, it had another name: the Silence Maker. For over a century, the galaxy had considered humanity's military capabilities regional. We were inventive but outdated, still clinging to projectile weapons when most civilizations used particle beams or plasma arrays. Our ships relied on armor instead of sophisticated deflectors. Our fighters preferred high acceleration and pilot reflexes over autonomy.
Railguns weren't new. By the 21st century, humans had already built experimental ones capable of launching projectiles at 2 to 3 kilometers per second. The problem was scaling. The heat, the power requirements, and the rail wear made them impractical for heavy use. But deep space engineering in the late 2200s had changed the game. New graphene titanium composite rails could survive repeated firings without warping. Room temperature superconductors eliminated most resistive losses, meaning more of the power went into acceleration instead of heat. Still, the Thunderstrike wasn't a ship-mounted weapon. It was too big, too power-hungry, and too heavy. Instead, it was mounted on an orbital platform the size of a city, with its own fusion reactors dedicated solely to charging the rails. The projectile itself was another story. Tungsten wasn't chosen because it was exotic. It was chosen because it was brutally effective. Its density, about 19.3 grams per cubic centimeter, made it ideal for retaining momentum over long distances. At 0.02 C, about 6,000 kilometers per second, even a small tungsten slug carried enough energy to rival nuclear warheads, without the political and environmental baggage of radiation. When early simulations were run, the results caused more than a few engineers to sit in stunned silence. If the slug hit a planetary surface, an impact crater 5 kilometers wide, shock waves felt across continents, tsunami-level displacement if it hit an ocean. If it hit a ship, it wouldn't explode. It would simply pass through, vaporizing everything in its path with the sheer heat of compression and keep going until it left the system. The test that everyone was invited to. The UTDA could have kept the project secret. Instead, they decided on the opposite, a public demonstration. Invitations were sent to every member of the Galactic Council, including the Vorak. The location? A neutral asteroid belt in the Cygnus Verge, far from inhabited worlds. The target was an old Vorak dreadnought, stripped of its reactor but left intact otherwise. It was 4 kilometers long, with armor layers half a kilometer thick in some sections. In its time, it had been called unkillable. The human message was clear. Watch what happens.
In the observation stations, aliens from over 40 species gathered. The Dalari military attaché, a longtime critic of human overcompensation, smirked at the setup. Projectile weapons? This is going to be embarrassing for them, he whispered to his aide. The Chalara observers, whose fleet specialized in ultra-fast plasma bursts, exchanged polite but skeptical looks. Even some humans weren't sure. There had never been a test at full power. If something went wrong, the failure would be broadcast across the galaxy, a humiliation on a scale Earth could hardly afford. The firing sequence. Inside the Thunderstrike control chamber, Captain Mara Vance oversaw the sequence. The coil capacitors were already humming, feeding terawatts into the rails. A final systems check flashed green. Vance spoke into the comm. Capture locked, distance 213 kilometers, firing in 10 seconds. On every observation screen, the dreadnought drifted silently, lit by the cold light of a nearby star. The crosshairs marked its center. 10, 9, 8. No one blinked. 3, 2, 1. Fire.
Stars. From the outside, the firing looked underwhelming. No thunderous blast, no glowing arc, just a faint vibration along the platform, a shimmer of heat as the rails discharged. Then, a half-second later, the slug hit. There was no explosion in the traditional sense. A pulse of white light flared where the projectile struck. The center section of the dreadnought simply ceased to exist for a fraction of a second before venting molten metal and atmosphere into space. The slug didn't stop. It passed through the dreadnought, an asteroid behind it, and another derelict ship, leaving perfect circular holes in each before disappearing into the black. The silence. In the observation chambers, the reaction was immediate and silent. The Dalari attaché's smirk had vanished. The Shalara commander's tendrils twitched in shock. The Vorak observers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes narrowing but their jaws tight. One Galactic Council official, a Tauranin, finally broke the silence. "That was a single shot?" The human liaison smiled faintly. "Yes, and we can reload in 7 minutes." The political fallout. The demonstration was more than just a weapons test. It was a statement. For decades, the Galactic Council had enforced humane warfare standards, weapon yields capped at certain limits, prohibitions on planetary bombardment, and mandatory ceasefire protocol.